Hello everyone, my name is Giannis Fikioris. My PhD is at Cornell University, and today I'll be presenting you my work that was published on EC'23, Liquid Welfare Guarantees for No-Regret Learning in Sequential Budgeted Auctions. And this is joint work with my advisor Eva Tardos. So let's talk, let's talk about sequential budgeted second price auctions. So some of you might be familiar with the setting. There are T rounds, there's only one item per round, there are N players, each player has a value VAT for the one item in round T. We firstly assume that the player's value is additive across the items of the rounds he's won. And then players' utilities are budgeted quasi-linear, which means that player's utility is his value minus his total payment, as long as the payment is less than his budget, or minus infinite otherwise. So this is how I like to depict the setting. We have N players, each has their own values in every round, and each of them has this AI algorithm that they consider and tells them how to bid in each round, given the history of the previous round, given their current value, etc. So previous work has considered this setting, namely Balser and Wood developed this adaptive pacing algorithm, which provides some really nice guarantees for a player's utility if they use it. One of the guarantees they provide is what I call the cooperation guarantee, which says that if every player is using the adaptive pacing algorithm and their values are sampled from a distribution every round, then here every player achieves no regrets. And what this means is that the resulting utility is at least the utility they would have achieved had they were they able to choose the best sequence of feeds in hindsight. So had they seen what everyone else bid, their own values, what would their max utility have been if they had chosen the bids? And this is minus some small subadditive in sublinear in T term, square root T. So this is the cooperation guarantee. They also have an adversarial guarantee in which a single player is using the adaptive pacing algorithm, and now his values are picked adversarially, as well as the behavior of the other players is adversarial. So in this setting, uh, they they prove a similar bound, but now it's a competitive ratio style bound. So it's similar to the one before, but the total utility, the comparison with the optimal utility is divided by gamma for some gamma, which is at least one. Um, yeah, so this is some individual player guarantees if players use the algorithm. What about aggregate guarantees? And the obvious question is what happens to social welfare? First, let me tell you that social welfare doesn't make a lot of sense in budget settings because it's not easy to approach. It can be proven that it's inapproximable. So instead, we look at liquid welfare, and it's basically the extension of generalization of social welfare budgeted settings. And the liquid welfare of some player is defined as the minimum, his value, and the budget. And the total liquid welfare is the sum of liquid welfares. And what liquid welfare is trying to capture is that the player shouldn't hope to get value more than his budget, and that's why his contribution in the total liquid welfare is capped by his budget. This recent paper in EC'23 consider liquid welfare in the cooperation setting that I described before. So players are using the adaptive pacing algorithm, and their values are drawn from distribution. And as I argued before, because of the Balser-Gura guarantee, this provides no regret for every player. And in this setting, they prove that on expectation, the liquid welfare is half of the optimal one. So in this setting, not only every player has a good guarantee, but also the aggregate guarantee we care about, liquid welfare is high compared to the optimum. So a natural question is, first let me say that it's a really nice result, but unfortunately it has two caveats. One is that everyone is using the adaptive pacing algorithm, which is a very specific algorithm, very specific structure. And also the values are Bayesian, so they're transfer distribution. So one question is, can we generalize this? Can we say something like, do individual guarantees about the players, if players have no regret, can we say something about welfare? So if you generalize the previous setting, every player is using their own algorithm and their values might be adversarial. And all we know about their algorithm is that they have no regret, or more generally, they have a bound competitive ratio, so they get a gamma fraction of their optimal utility hindsight. So unfortunately, the answer is no in second prize. So the eventual player no regret doesn't imply anything about welfare. And this was proven in the same paper I talked about before, the guy told the told paper 96-2023. And they have a very simple example where there's two players. The values are basically Bayesian because they're constant every round. Gamma is 1, the regret is 0, so players are getting all of the maximum utility hindsight. But unfortunately, the resulting liquid welfare is a tiny fraction of the optimal one for any action. So this is as bad as it gets. So it seems kind of hopeless. So this is where my research comes in, and I ask the question, does this improve in first price auctions? So instead of sequential budgeted second price, we consider sequential budgeted first price. And before I talk about any results, let me say that in all the previous examples that I gave in second prize, I had the players compete against the maximum bids in hindsight. So what was their utility? Like the utility had no regret compared to their maximum utility in hindsight given the best sequence of bids. And this is too strong for first price auctions, even if you don't consider budget. So you consider the classical setting with no budgets. So if you would try to compete against the best sequence of bids, in second price, it's very easy to get zero regret. You just bid your value all the time. But unfortunately, in first price, there's no strategy that guarantees sublinear regret. So you can get regret that scales linearly with t. So for this reason, we need a weaker benchmark. So we want players to have big utility compared with something weaker than the best sequence of bids. So we consider what usually happens in online learning, the best action in hindsight. And here it's a little tricky to define what does action mean. So an obvious choice is that an action is a single bid, but then this means that some bid might be good for some rounds where your value is high, but in other rounds where your value is low, you might be overbidding, and that's a really bad idea, especially in first price auctions. So instead, we consider a setting multiplier as the action. So a setting multiplier is the number 0, 1, which says that the action you should take this round is bid lambda times your value. So we consider the best hindsight multiplier to be the comparator that we used. And this is what we're gonna assume the players compete against. So players are gonna compete against the utility they would have achieved had they picked the best lambda in hindsight, given what everyone else did. And let me say that the setting multipliers are actually used in the adaptive Bayesian algorithm of Balser and Gur. And what they do is that every player has some lambda IT, which is some setting multiplier, and beats lambda IT times their value. And they observe the spending, and then they update the multiplier for the next round. And they achieve the result by tuning this update rule. So this is the setting we're going to consider in sequential budgeted first price auctions. So we have n players, their values might be adversarial, each is using their own algorithm, and we don't know anything about their algorithm other than their utility in hindsight. So their resulting utility is a gamma fraction of the utility of the best setting multiplier minus some regret term, which is usually small. So it's not the important part. The important part is the gamma. So the question is, can we say anything in this setting now? This is identical with the second price one, but now we have first price. Can we say anything about liquid welfare? And we prove that the answer is yes. So we prove that if players are gamma competitive, then the resulting liquid welfare is a gamma plus half plus something small fraction of the optimal one. And this, the denominator is 2.41 when gamma equals 1. So this is close to the bound of 2 that the guy on the toll paper had, but with much general assumptions. So we assume any algorithm that has competitive bound competitive ratio, and also we assume that the values might be adversarial, while they assume that they are Bayesian. So let me give you some intuition on how we get this bound. So first we want to say that the utility of a certain multiplier by using a certain multiplier in hindsight is high. So this is trying to capture the fact that we use the weaker benchmark, but this is not too weak. Like the utility is still high, so we can say some meaningful results. So we consider two cases. One is if by using multiplier lambda we run out of budget, then we can prove this bound for the utility. And this is because it's first price, we know that every time a player wins the auction, then they bid lambda times they pay lambda times their value. Which means that since they run out of budget, this means that we can say that both the value is high and the payment is high compared to the budget because they run out. The other case is what happens if lambda doesn't run out of budget. And in this case, we can prove an inequality like this, which says that the utility of lambda is a fraction of the i's optimal contribution to the optimal liquid welfare minus a fraction of the prices of his optimal bundle. And some of you might, this looks a lot like the smoothness framework, so it is similar to that, but we need some more general ideas. We need to use it for every lambda. So this basically proves that our benchmark is not too weak. So we also have to prove that the resulting liquid welfare of a player I is high. And this is quite easier. So if the resulting value is less than their budget, then we use the utility bound that's provided by the algorithm that the player uses. It's there on the bottom right. If the value is bigger than the budget, then we know that his contribution to the liquid welfare is optimal. It's equal to the budget. So this is how we get the guarantee. So what about upper bounds for the achievable liquid welfare? So we prove an upper bound for every gamma. And we prove upper bounds on their very strong assumptions. So there are only two players. Their values are basically Bayesian because they're constant every round. They are gamma competitive, as I said before, for any gamma, at least one. And the regret is super low. Like it's not even square root, it's less than one. And under these very strong assumptions, we can prove that, even under this very strong assumption, we can prove that the resulting liquid welfare is less than gamma or 2 fraction of the optimal, whatever is worse. So this makes our guarantee of 2.4 that we had for gamma equals 1 almost tight, and for large gamma, we had gamma plus a constant. This is gamma. So the two prices of energy are very close to each other. Let me present you the price of anarchy bound of 2, so that the liquid welfare is half of the optimal one. It can be half the optimal one. So we consider two players, Alice and Bob. Both have a budget epsilon times t for some small constant epsilon. Alice's value is 1 every round, and Bob's value is epsilon every round. And it's not hard to compute that the optimal liquid welfare here is about 2 times epsilon times t. For whatever reason, Alice decides to bid epsilon this every round, and Bob to also bid epsilon round, but like tiny bit less than Alice's epsilon, so that Alice wins every round. And given this bidding, it's not hard to prove that every player is getting all of their optimal utility inside. That's because Alice is getting everything for, she values everything for 1, she gets everything for super cheap, she gets everything for epsilon, and she couldn't have gotten it for cheaper. And also Bob misses out on every item, but if he wanted to bid higher, he would have to bid more than epsilon, and that would be more of his value, so he doesn't want to do that. So both players are super satisfied. And because Alice gets everything, it's not hard to compute that the resulting total liquid welfare is epsilon times 2, which is half of the optimal one. So I talked a lot about sequential first price auctions where their players' valuations are additive across rounds. What if they're submodular across rounds? Can we say anything in that case? And the answer is yes. So under similar assumptions, we can prove that if pairs are gamma competitive with submodular valuation this time, then the resulting liquid welfare is a gamma plus 1 plus a small number fraction of the optimal one. And now the denominator is 2.62 instead of 2.4 when gamma equals 1. So again, this is close to that because we had an upper bound of 2. And also it's close tight when gamma equals 1, and when gamma is really big, then it becomes asymptotically tight. And here's a comparison of the two bounds, the ideal and submodular, for small competitive ratios, gamma from 1 to 10. And you see that they're both very linear, like it's gamma plus a constant, as I have shown you, and they're also very close to each other. So I've been saying a lot that what happens if players have an algorithm that has that achieves a gamma or a gamma fraction of their optimal utility hindsight, optimal shading multiplier in hindsight, but I never really said if that's achievable. Like maybe I'm assuming that players can do something that it's not really achievable. So we do have a result for that for additive valuations. So you consider the worst case scenario, the adversarial scenario where a player is using some algorithm and everything else is adversarial. And we saw that there is an algorithm where player I can achieve with high probability a T over Bi fraction of their optimal of the utility of the optimal shading multiplier in hindsight. And this is a constant if the budget of the player I scales linearly with the time t. And actually our bound is a bit more general than that because we do this via reduction to the bounds with knapsack framework, but this is the most important result of this. So constant competitive ratio if the budget is linear with time. And this might look a bit bad, but it's actually the result that also Balser would get. So we get the same competitive ratio, and it's also the best possible. So there is an example where you can show that we can do better than this. So that's all. Thanks a lot for watching. Let me give you a small summary of what I talked about. So I first showed you an example where in second price, players being one competitive doesn't say anything about the price of anarchy, can be unbounded. In first price auction, instead, I said that when players are gamma competitive, the price of anarchy is bounded by gamma plus constant. And I also showed you that there are some lower bounds of the price of anarchy, which says that it has to be at least gamma and 2, so you can do better than that, which makes a previous result almost tight for small gamma and asymptotically tight for large gamma. I extended the result also to the case of submodular valuation, where the bound on the price of anarchy is a bit worse than the one for additive valuations. And then I showed you that additive players can always be T over B competitive, no matter how other players act or if their values are adversarial. Thanks a lot.